me up one day and they're like, hey, you want to have lunch, you know? And I was like, sure. And I came over and had lunch, and they showed me like all their concept art and some of their early engine stuff. And they were like, so do you want to come on board as a lead? And I was like, I don't know. And then I went home and I couldn't get the artwork out of my head. And I was like, this is definitely something that I would regret if I didn't work on it. And that's how I got in. And then, so I came in as a lead and then slowly worked my way up. We had to replace the original art director, and then they offered that to me. And then from there, I was art director for quite a while, probably, I mean, until the end of the project, I was the art director. But about, I want to say 4 years ago, I started doing creative direction. And actually, I was the creative director on the original Blur trailer, the CG trailer. Mm-hmm. And like, I co-wrote the script, and I started doing a lot of co-direction with Blur on it, and doing voice direction and everything to get the tone right. And when we had that trailer, all of a sudden we knew that was the tone of the game. Like, we had a lot of art and we had a lot of stories and everything, but the tone wasn't quite there yet. And after that, I kind of started doing more creative direction across the whole company outside of the art department.
Gotcha. Now you're development director. What is a development director? Can you define that for me?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird because I think it has different titles at different companies, but essentially I'm in charge of all development. I was in charge of just the art department, and now I'm in charge of the design department, the art department, the audio department, and the engineers. So anything having to do with the game, I make sure everything's scheduled out.
So you're like a producer on steroids.
I'm like, kind of like half producer, half product director. Like, we have a product director, Mike Donatelli, and me and Mike, we sit together and we literally will map out like the next year, on paper of what we want to do, and then we work with Chad, the new creative director. And we'll talk about the stories. We'll talk about the content. And we're all kind of we don't have a environment here where it's just like one guy making all the calls. So we can kind of just all get together and talk, and we're like, okay, I'll do this, you do that, and we collaborate. And so although technically I'm partly production, even though none of the producers report to me. That's a whole different department. I more work with all the directors to make sure that they can get stuff done. So Mike, we might say, okay, we want to do this thing for housing. And Mike Donatelli, the project director, will be like, okay, I want it to be like this, or here's the general philosophy behind it. And then it's my job to sit with all the other directors, scope it out, make sure we have the resources, figure out how long it's going to take or when we want to release it in post-launch, and then make sure that everybody has signed off on it, that we play it. Like, I play the game more now than I ever did as the creative or art director. Like, I'll sit down in every single play test, whether it's a PvP map or some post-launch zone or a dungeon or adventure. I'm actually playing the game, giving feedback to all the directors. So that's a little bit different in that I did play the game, but I played it more for the art and the creative direction, and now I have to pay attention to everything. But yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like steering this giant ship, or more like a giant fleet of ships, and making sure we're going in the right direction.
My goodness, I can imagine that would be so much coordination.
Yeah, it's pretty intimidating. Like, I think I have around 200 people under me. So, it's pretty intimidating. And plus for me, it's just a learning experience. Like, I've been pretty in tune with with the art and the design to some degree of the game, and a lot of the audio too, because I work very closely with the actors and with our composer when I was creative director.
Mm-hmm.
But on the engineering side of it, it's like a whole nother world. It's like, it's just something I've known about, but I've never had a lot of exposure to. And just kind of learning the lingo and understanding all the different roles and everything, beyond just the title. Yeah, it's been quite a learning experience. I just see it as the next phase of. I always consider myself a game developer, because I think if you say, hey, I'm an art director, well, you're a game art director. Art direction for games is much different than film or for publishing or anything like that. And I think that if you don't understand game design and you're an art director on the game, then you're not going to be a very effective art director. So I feel like this is kind of just like a natural progression for me. Becoming development director is just understanding the game development process and more than I was as a art director or creative director.
It seems like you would have to have a really refined vision of, the core of the game and what it is. How would you define Wildstar for people that haven't played?
Wildstar for people, I think it's the funnest time you're going to have in an MMO. I think that we have so many things for so many different players that if you enjoy any aspect of MMOs, you will have fun with Wildstar. Housing is amazing. Our dungeons and PvP are for more advanced players. So if you enjoy that type of thing, to me, it's the next level. I think we're a game that just isn't afraid to have fun. And if there's something I've seen with the players and the reviews and everything, it's that we have a lot of humor, we have a lot of personality in the game, and you don't see a lot of that in MMOs. And so if you like just kind of being in an enjoyable environment and an enjoyable setting and just having fun, like I said, like I decided the other day, redneck, white trash, housing plot is going to be my thing. And the funny thing is I'm going to make an alt that is going to be, a medic or a doctor, and I'm going to make it like a science lab, and I get to make those creative choices. And to me, that's fun. I get to be what I want to be, and there's a lot of ways in which I could just express myself as a player. But also it's just fun, running around and fighting. Our combat is super action packed. So I think that, you don't realize that you're killing a lot of enemies because you're just having fun with it. You're dodging out of the way and you're reacting. And I think it's much different. I played a lot of MMOs, and MMOs have that addictive nature, and our game's no different. But I think that we mask that kind of repetitiveness with just fun mechanics and fun gameplay.
Gotcha. It's something I play as much as I love story, and I'll probably go back and restart all my characters so I can read every little thing. I just play it when I'm stressed and I just want to kill things really quickly. And it's just fun to run through. It's rainbow of colors, just slashing things left and right.
I think with the story, and Chad Moore would be furious with me if I didn't pimp the story a little bit. But I think the cool thing about the story is a lot of people, they don't come into the game for the story, but when they actually discover and experience it, they're like, oh wow, I've never expected that. Like I look at a lot of our Twitter feed and everything, and people are always talking about the story and how they were surprised that we had something so dramatic in the game. And I think there's a lot of we have such a variety. We have the the lop that may or may not have accidentally murdered.
Don't spoil it! Don't spoil it for me, Matt!
I said may or may not. It's a setup, right? At the same time, we have a overarching story about like the universe is, under threat, and you have to help save it. And so we're not just always one thing at one time. We're different things all over the place, and that's one of the great things about having a new IP that we could just literally just open up the floodgates of ideas and really just run with them all.
You've talked before in interviews about the art being influenced by iconic and recognizable things like American European comics, American Japanese animation, things like that. But what are your specific favorites in that genre and why?
Um, my favorites. I mean, it's tough. Because I think that what people want, they want to look at something and then see how it looks similar to other things. I think my biggest influences are like Tank Girl, and the Gorillas, like I think I am me personally, I think I'm most influenced by uh, animated shows of the 80s, stuff like Robotech and Transformers and G.I. Joe, Thundercats,
Silverhawks.
yeah, He-Man, or Mighty Orbots, if you're getting more obscure. All that stuff, just, I don't know, like, I was a child of the 80s, so, like, it was like, you watch the cartoon, you buy the toys, you sit there with a giant bowl of cereal, and, pretty much a modern-day parent's nightmare for their kid, just sitting in front of the TV.
Face full of sugar.
Reading comics, asking for toys, all that stuff, right? And it was the whole package for me. I love having the curtains that were, Star Wars curtains and everything. Yeah, like they learned how to sell like merchandising to kids like me. And I always kind of saw Wildstar as that. Like I love, like we'd create characters and I'd be like, oh man, I want the toy, or, like I want that spaceship, or I want the t-shirt. And to me, that style-wise, that's what I like. I always refer back to G.I. Joe because I love something about G.I. Joe is that, like, every character had their signature, right? So, like, they had hundreds of figures, but iconically, each character had their own look, had their own theme. And I think that's a lot of what we kept going back to with the game is like, okay, when we have our iconic characters, what is that thing you remember about the character? Do they have a signature visual on them? And we made sure that everything had that. And, whether we had like, okay, the Dominion have a tank and the Exiles have a tank, and, so they're kind of equal, but different. I think that stuff harkens back to, G.I. Joe for me. But comic book wise, like, I think when you look at the work of like Joe Mad, like, believe it or not, Mike Mignola is like a big influence on us, and just in terms of kind of like having this kind of really retro tech type stuff in his comic books, kind of like this handmade stuff. We didn't look at that exactly, but we all love Mignola, and obviously that's going to come into things. In terms of anime, all I could say is we were all watching Full Metal Alchemist, at a very critical time when we were creating the game. We were watching, and then it turned into Gurren Lagann, and we just, I don't know, I think as artists, you're just a big sponge, and you just constantly absorbing all this information, and you're not really saying, oh, let's take that and put it in here, let's take that piece and put it in here. It just all kind of comes in together inside of you, and then when you're just putting ideas on paper, you don't realize you might be pulling from things that have influenced you for the past 20, 30 years.
Gotcha. One of the questions I did have further down was that it seems like you have mirrors on the Exiles and the Dominion side, example like the Chua and the Arin, kind of both cute, and Granak and Draken. Is this intentional to have, kind of similarities as far as maybe appearance or, badassery on the Exiles and Dominions?
I mean, less appearance, but definitely in terms of, like, tone. What we said was, we kind of looked at, gamers as like, okay, well, what do gamers want? Like, some people, they want to be the badass guy. Some people want to be the macho guy. Some people want to be the cute, guy. And so we looked at all that stuff and we tried to break it down into, okay, who would, what subset of our audience would want something they'd want to play. And all we did was we went around the team and said, who would you want to play